Good morning. Maybe not. Is this on? It is now. Good morning. As soon as Lisa takes her seat, we'll get started here. Hey, good morning and welcome. Today, first of all, thank you for being here today. The there are many issues that face our community, and none more important or foundational to the recovery of our community and communities across the country than education. And last year we filled 1,000 positions at our company. 500 of those were filled from the outside, and the others were kind of internal replacements. We promote somebody, we bring in somebody from the outside to fill their role. And the number one question that families ask when they come to Erie and say, do I really want to live in Erie, PA, isn't about the snow, it's about the education system. It is a major consideration for all of us and should be. And so it's one to be taken very seriously, and I'm really proud of the work that's going on in the community, initiated by the school district, but now being supported by the United Way. The work and partnership between the school district and United Way in forming community schools, the reevaluation of the curricula that has occurred, and really the data-driven approach to what's happening, the kind of putting a little more science in it than elbow grease, so to speak, I think is going to make a tremendous impact over the next decade. And so this morning we're going to hear from folks that are leading this effort. Lori Root from United Way, Brian Polito, the superintendent of the schools, Teresa Zumagala will be up to talk to us also. And then Neil's going to talk to us, I think, more about the physical plant and some other things. And then James Grunke will take it home, and we'll be off within 1 hour, which is the way the Manufacturers Association rolls here. They keep things tight and high, so that's a good thing. But I really appreciate you being here today. I think we're going to learn a lot of very valuable information. And today, look at today as a stop along the journey. This isn't the end of the journey. You're going to learn things. What can we do with these things? How can we help support the effort to make the lives of our children in this community better and make this a better community in the long term? So I want to get into the meat of the program, and at this time I'm going to invite Lori Root to take the stage. Lori, before you do, I do want to mention we've softly started a campaign in support of the community schools. And softly, I mean we haven't done a big ad campaign or anything like that, but we formed a cabinet that's going to raise funds really for two purposes. One, we would like to fund Erie High and make it a community school. And that's going to require a lot more effort than the individual grade schools and even Strong Vincent Middle School in terms of the number of support personnel necessary given the student population there. But the second part of the campaign is even maybe more profound, and that is creating an endowment, the income of which will be available to support community schools in perpetuity. And so, as I told Ainsley Brosick when we were doing the capital campaign for the Children's Museum, my wife and I are going to knock on every door in this community until we get the funds raised that we need to support this model. We firmly believe in it. There are cabinet members who are out in the audience. Thank you for being here today. It's an important thing, and I will shamelessly tell you that if you're interested, talk to me before you leave today if you'd like, and I'll follow up with you. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Lori Root to the stage. Lori?
Thank you, Tim. And thank you all for being here this morning. In the late fall of 2023, Mike Jarosevich, our Senior Vice President of Community Impact, James Grunke, and I attended an EPS presentation that was an in-depth briefing on Erie's public schools covering the financial history, academic update, facilities investment, and current financial condition. This briefing was spearheaded by Daria Devlin, who was then president of the school board. While we had heard much of this information before, this was the first time that it was put into a comprehensive briefing. Immediately following, we did a quick huddle and agreed that business and civic leaders in our community really need to hear this presentation. Erie Insurance agreed and generously stepped up to sponsor this event. So that's why we invited you here today. You're in for an hour packed with information that you will find interesting, oftentimes surprising, to say the least. But before I hand it over to Brian, Teresa, and Neil, we wanted to share some background on United Way's partnership with Erie's Public Schools. In the 2016-17 school year, United Way launched the community school model in 5 public schools in the city. Since that time, we have expanded to 13 Erie's public schools, including all elementary and middle schools. As Tim mentioned, currently we are well into the planning phases of bringing Erie High on as a community school this fall. Once Erie High becomes a community school, there will be a continuum from elementary through high school that we fully expect will have amazing results for students in Erie's public schools. It will be a complete continuum of the community school model, the full service community school model, in the largest school district in our county and one of the very few across the country. In addition to Erie's public schools, the elementary schools in Girard, Iroquois, and Union City are United Way community schools. So this morning, you'll hear how Erie's public schools has been and continues to be underfunded, and how significant the gap is between what EPS should be receiving and what they actually receive, which has a direct impact on our students, and it's not good news. We hope you will gain a better understanding of the strong connection between the investment in our public schools and the return investment of the greater Erie community. For Erie to have a healthy and vibrant economy, United Way, the Chamber, and Erie Insurance firmly believe we need to invest upstream in the human capital, the most precious of which are our children, the next generation. That is your workforce of tomorrow. The role of public education goes beyond the students, which are our priority for sure, to the very health and well-being of our community. As James likes to say, Erie's Public Schools is an all of us issue. Business leaders, civic leaders, residents, your neighbors, you. All of us in the city and in the county. Again, thank you for attending this morning, and thank you to Erie Insurance for their support. Now I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Brian Polito.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. Before I get started, I'd just like to recognize our board members that are here today. We have Board President Jay Brenneman, previous Board President Daria Devlin, Sumner Nichols, and Angela Amantangelo. They're working right along with us to get all this done, and we would not be where we are today without a supportive board, so thank you. So before we talk about where we are today, I thought I'd go back and put a little perspective around it and talk about where we've been. And what I'd like to start out with today is the financial crisis that hit the district in 2011 when my predecessor, Dr. Jabe Adams, took over. When he came on board, they were facing a very significant cash crunch to the point where they were going to struggle to make payroll. And so his first job as he became superintendent was not really about education. It was about balancing the budget and trying to make things work. So between 2011 and 2015, they went through and made a ton of cuts across the district. They had to close 3 buildings. They cut more than 200 full-time positions. And to put that into perspective, today we have about 1,200 employees, so it was a pretty big cut across the district. We actually wanted to preserve as much as we could in the classroom, so their central administration was really stripped. We cut about half of the positions in our building, and we had numerous program cuts, and there was little to no wage increases. And despite that, the district was facing multi-million-dollar cuts. So I came on as the CFO in 2015, and the reason why Jay recruited me to come on board is because I did have some success in other school districts balancing their budgets and finding ways to save money. So when I came on, I thought for sure that I was going to be able to find some ways to cut Erie's budget. But when I got here, they had done everything that they could pretty much. And at that point, our spending on a per pupil basis was in the bottom 20%. And that's despite having some of the biggest challenges in the state. Our poverty level is in the top 2 to 3% in the state. We have a high population of English language learners. We have a high special ed population. And we have a large number of charter students as well. So as we looked into it, we really looked and we determined that it was not the expense side of the equation that was the problem, it was the revenue side. And what we found was that we were the poster child for the state's inequitable funding system. We were one of the most underfunded school districts in the state. And that happened because in 1995, the legislature, for whatever reason, decided that they weren't going to continue to fund school districts on a per pupil basis. They weren't going to use a formula. They just decided to give everybody a 2 to 3% increase over what they had the previous year. And over the next 20 years, a lot of things happened. Some school districts saw some pretty significant declines in enrollment. Others saw increases. The socioeconomics of the school districts changed. But through that time period, the funding just went up 2 to 3%, despite where your enrollment was and what was happening in your school. And it created a lot of winners and losers across the state, and we were one of the biggest losers. So as we looked at that, we did see that across the state there was a number of school districts here and there that had these one-off adjustments to their subsidy where they lobbied Harrisburg and they got a $8 million or a $10 million adjustment to their subsidy, and we felt that was probably the best way that we could balance our budget at the time. So we started heading down that path, and Dan Laughlin is here in the audience, and he's well aware of that because he was instrumental in helping us get that across the finish line. So we did start to lobby Harrisburg. And we got their attention, and in 2016, they brought in some financial consultants that they use for school districts that are in financial distress. And they identified and confirmed that we did have a big funding issue on the revenue side, and we were able to get our first adjustment of $4 million. That was just a one-time adjustment to close some of our gap. In 2017, things were getting very dire for us, despite that $4 million, and we were just a couple months out from not making payroll. All our bills were way behind. We are Highmark Insurance. They were obviously very patient with us during that time period. We were a couple months behind on that. They continued to insure our employees, but we were really struggling to keep things afloat. So the last thing that we felt that we could do to balance the budget on the expense side was to reconfigure our schools. We did have some decline in enrollment. We had 4 high schools. We looked at the numbers, and we felt that we can consolidate them into 2 schools. So we went about a massive reconfiguration across the district, closing 2 of our high schools, consolidating them, and then we also made changes to our structure at the elementary and middle school level. We had a number of K-8 schools, we had others that were K-5, and we had some 6 to 8 middle schools. So we went straight K-5 for the elementary, 6 through 8 for the middles, and then, of course, the high school in 9 to 10. So in 2017, thanks to our efforts lobbying Harrisburg, we were successful in getting a $14 million permanent adjustment in our subsidy. And what that did is really buy us some time and stabilize our budget. Most of those funds want to balance out our structural deficit, but we did have left over a couple $1 million that we were able to invest in programming and facilities. So as we looked at that, we knew we needed a plan. We needed multiple plans to make sure that that investment actually paid off, and we started to see improvements in student achievement across the district. So in 2018, we decided that that was going to be our year of planning. And so we went through a very comprehensive strategic plan process for the academics. Many of you were involved in that. We had stakeholders from across the community give us input, and we developed a 5-year educational plan. At the same time, most of our buildings were falling apart around us, And we had to find a way to, as we decided, keep all of our buildings warm, safe, and dry. So we contracted with an architect to develop a district-wide facilities plan to determine how we were going to tackle some of those challenges. At the same time, with the $14 million came a financial administrator from the state to work with us on our finances. His name was Charles Zogby. And he worked with us when he came on board. He actually embraced the plans that we had going for the academics and the facilities and worked with us to implement or include into the financial plan the major initiatives in both of those plans. So between all of those plans, we had our marching orders for the next 5 to 6 years. So every year since then, and the board knows this, we would take a look at those plans in the summer, and we would develop my goals for the upcoming year based on what we felt were the priorities in those plans. So the next 5 years, we put together the plan, we set goals for each year, we worked on those goals and repeated the cycle. So where we are right now, looking at this, our financial improvement plan, as most of you know, we were removed from Financial Watch about 2 years ago now. The first school district in the state were able to be removed from Financial Watch. So that plan is finished. Our district-wide facilities plan is about halfway done. We're just about done with phase 1 of that, starting to do some planning for phase 2, and Neil's going to talk about that in a little bit. And our strategic plan, looking at that, if you look at the way that's structured in the back, there's a number of key actions that we were going to implement in order to improve student achievement. And as I started to look at those this past summer, I realized that most of them had been implemented or were in the process of being implemented. So we're really moving to the end of that strategic plan process. And as Teresa will share with you in a minute, we're starting to see results. We're starting to see some pretty consistent movement in our student achievement across the district. So we want to share some of that. We still have a lot of work to do here in the district, but we made a lot of progress. So we want to talk a little bit about the strategic plan and the facilities plan. And we're going to start with Teresa Zumagala, our Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having us today. We're really looking forward to telling you the good stories that are happening in the district and also some of the challenges that we've had along the way that we've been able to set the right way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about student growth and support, and I also did start with this slide that Brian had, looking at the misalignment. And the reason I chose to start with this slide is to really drive home that on the educational and student service side, we really needed to support, we need support and we needed to make those priorities. So when about 2018 hit, we realized that we had spent about 25 years using curriculum that was adopted 25 years ago. I've been in the district for 29, and we were still using the same English language arts curriculum. We wanted to align instruction and student supports for all students and ensure the district have the resources needed for success. The structure of our strategic plan, and I choose this pretty much every time that I present, is looking at that, the structure of the strategic plan and that outer core. That's where we empower our infrastructure. Our infrastructure was so weakened throughout the years without having the materials and the supports that we needed. We really needed to strengthen that for all of our employees in order to get to the root of that, which is instructional effectiveness, and then ideally in the middle, student learning. The 4 pillars of our strategic plan, they all play against each other, really, or around each other, I should say. My department focuses on pillars A and B. Pillar A is the equitable access to standards-aligned instruction, and Pillar B are going to be our student supports. So breaking down those barriers that students come to us with, and that's how the United Way Community Schools folds into that model. And we use Pillars C and D to provide professional learning, and also use data. So you'll see in a bit a slide that's coming up later that we always use the data to make our decisions in a cycle of improvement. The greatest impact on student learning. All research points that the greatest impact on student learning is our teachers, our instructors. Our second greatest impact on student learning are our building leaders. So those folks that are in our schools, running our schools every day. And I thought a lot about this last night when I was reviewing some of the slides, and I want you to keep the word access in the back of your mind as I go through the rest of this. Access, teachers having access to high quality instructional materials rather than trying to find things off of the internet or piecemeal things together when we're not even sure whether or not their standards aligned. That's what we did for 20, 25 years, and it was difficult. Our teachers, and I can speak from experience, at times were acting as mental health specialists, perhaps a guidance counselor if we had to share a guidance counselor with another school, possibly a phys ed teacher or an art teacher because we were sharing those teachers as well. So we knew we had to provide our teachers and our leaders with the materials that they need to run a successful building and also the supports. So pull those responsibilities of being the mental health specialist or the case manager or the guidance counselor and really build our schools to support and pull those responsibilities and give those to the experts that do that work. As a teacher, you're not trained to be a mental health specialist, so we're very happy to have that. So this is another part of the empowering infrastructure. So just a very quick timeline. It's about 5 years, and you'll see that we began to adopt our materials in 2019. It's been a fast and furious materials adoption. They are all high quality instructional materials. We are in implementation stage, but in maybe a long 5 years, maybe a short 5 years, K to 12, English language arts and math, social studies at 6 to 12. We are now currently working on the next generation science standards that are coming out from the state, so we'll be adopting for that very soon, and all of that with a pandemic in between. And I can tell you that I'm blessed to work with a great team that has continued to lift this implementation throughout the last few years. Something that is fairly new is the student services. We did have a student services department prior to the pandemic, but it, again, because of the financial crisis, kind of went away. After we got back from the pandemic, I can remember sitting in Brian's office and talking about what the United Way work was doing for our first initial 5 schools. And we said, we need this. Our students need this. Our families need this in order to break those barriers so our teachers and our leaders can instruct and students can leave with the knowledge that they need. So moving on, if you recall that first graphic that I showed, the instructional effectiveness. So just because we adopt high quality instructional materials does not mean that all of a sudden everything is fixed. We're not just going to give students new books and teachers new books and everything is just going to fall into place. So my team and I decided that we needed to implement some structures to ensure consistent implementation across the district. I'm just going to go through a few of these. So our instructional leadership teams, we have one at each building, and what this instructional leadership team does is it ensures that the school is following their school improvement plan that is written every year for the state of Pennsylvania. Before, we were so busy, we wrote those for compliance and we put them on a shelf. Not anymore. Not anymore. So we run a cycle of improvement with those. Professional learning communities, we have those daily in our schools. What those might look like are a group of teachers and administrators looking at student work, looking at data, planning a lesson together, having discussion, what's working, what's not working, sharing. Learning walks is another, I love all of these things, but I'm only gonna go over a couple of more. But learning walks are when we as a group, central administration and building leadership, Work with teachers to plan lessons. We go in, we do a short observation of the lessons. We come back the next day and we debrief with the teachers to talk about steps moving forward. And they also help us learn. What are their struggles? What are their challenges? How can we adjust course? I included this. This is the Pennsylvania Cycle of Improvement. So this is, you will see this on PDE's website. And this is what we live by in all educational services, student services, special education services. We use this cycle in all of our planning, and we revisit it at least quarterly. And you'll see we set the direction, create the plan, implement the plan, and then the most important part is adjusting course, because we have to realize what's working and what we need to change in real time, not at the end of the year, at a quarter, so we can adjust to make sure we have the correct instruction in front of students and the correct supports. So now into some data. So this is our high school data. This is Keystone Achievement, and these are scores for the algebra, biology, and literature. Those are trigger courses. And you can see that there is struggle. Just for a quick key to this, the red area is below basic scoring. The yellow is basic, the green is proficient, and the blue is advanced. And you're going to see the same color coding throughout. So yes, these are our high school students, and we acknowledge that it's a continual struggle and there are some challenges. We are working on those as we speak, actually, looking at the curriculum, looking at the way we deliver instruction. We are currently working with West Ed at Erie High School and getting in those vital facilitator professional learning communities so we can get those teachers to work together moving forward. This is growth. This is PVOS growth. And again, we're not seeing great results here. Most of our growth in these three areas is well below right now, but we're hoping to see that change as students come through our system in the elementary and middle schools. So these are our PSSAs, English Language Arts, Math, and Science. And again, you will see that the trend is starting to come back. So we want to see that shift where we see less red and more green and blue. And this is an important slide to take a look at. So this is the growth. This is our students compared to themselves moving through. This is where we are going to start to close the gap. We know students aren't going to jump from below basic to proficient or advanced. We have to get them there, and we do that looking at their growth. So again, a very important planning piece. You'll see that except for the year that we came back from the pandemic, our students in 3 through 8 are showing growth that is above the average of the state and well above the average of the state. Very similar to what I was just talking about, these graphs show the increase in the percent proficient. These are our elementary schools, and the decrease in below basic. So for the most part, except for about 6 schools, our schools are moving in the right direction. They're showing the growth in the elementary, and we're very proud of the work that they're doing.
And that's something that we did not see before we implemented the curriculum. We would see spotty achievement improvements across the district, so we have to point to what we call bright spots, where we see 3rd grade in McKinley saw an improvement in their achievement. Here, this is the first time that any of us can remember that almost all of our elementary schools are moving in the right direction. So it's a big change for us, and we're very hopeful that trend's going to continue and move through the middle school as well as the high school.
And again, this is the middle school. You can see that there's just a little bit of a challenge with some of our work there. But again, as students come through our system, we are hoping to see continued growth. We also are able to offer additional learning opportunities for our students, which before before the financial crisis was addressed to some extent, we weren't able to do. We're also able to do this through our community schools and keeping kids with us for longer in the day. One of the biggest items that research is pointing to as for recovery from the pandemic is increased student attendance, increased after-school and summer programming, and increased high-dose tutoring, which we are able to offer right now for all of our students. This is one of my favorite slides to show. This is showing a cohorts of students. So you'll see at the top, those are our current fourth graders. Third graders are next, second graders, and our current first graders. And the reason I show this is because 1920 was the first year that we adopted our new math and ELA curriculum. So if you look at our current fourth graders, they were impacted by the pandemic. The rest of the cohorts, except for our students currently in first grade, were affected by the pandemic. The cohort at the bottom, they are the first group that have been able to receive their new instruction with the new materials without interruption for the whole year. And the reason I show that is for this reason. If you look at the red bar at the bottom, the below basic, what this cohort achieved in 1 year, if you look at our fourth graders, it took them 5 years to get there. So we're watching this cohort very closely as they're moving towards, moving through our system, and we're hoping to see that continued progress. That doesn't mean we forget about our fourth graders. We are still intervening, but what we are hoping is more kids are benefit from our Tier 1 instruction. And finally, the last thing I wanted to share with the group is some information about our high schools. And this has been a project for us over the last 2 or 3 years, and really increasing the opportunities for our high school students. And what the unwritten theme is, we have something for everybody. We're the only district in the area that can offer this to our students. Right now, since 2022, we have had an increase in our CTE numbers. Jason Bergert, our director, has really been working hard at that. Right now, we have 82 Erie High students taking courses at Collegiate Academy, 184 Collegiate Academy students taking courses at Erie High, and 30 students taking cyber courses at DePaulo and taking CTE courses at Erie High. So what we really want to do, and what we are starting to do, is really communicate to our younger students, our middle school students, what are your interests? What path can we put you on moving forward? Because we have just about everything for you. So it's been a very, very encouraging time in the district. I look forward to the next couple of years to seeing this system grow and see our students benefit. And I hope to be back soon to report out at another time. I'm going to ask Neil Brockman, Assistant Superintendent of Operations, to come on up.
Good morning, everyone. So as I sat there listening to Teresa discuss what we're doing on the educational side, she points out something that comes to the operations and facilities side, and it's the word access. I think it's something that many of us in this room may have taken for granted growing up and going to school, is having access to facilities that actually are warm, safe, and dry. I think back to the year, and I'm not even sure when it was, during a financial crisis, when the Grover Cleveland PTA had to show up at a board meeting to plead with the board and the superintendent just to install a new roof on the building, because they and the students deserved something more than 25-gallon buckets sitting in a classroom collecting rainwater. Or the classrooms that we had over at Wayne, where when it snowed, the snow would actually come into the building. So when we entered Financial Watch and received the additional state subsidy, the board made a point to create this district-wide facility plan that was centered around warm, safe, and dry. And the intent behind that initial plan was to do small projects across the district that will accomplish that. Security vestibules, something, again, that just about every school in the area had that we didn't happen to have. New roofs on buildings that were leaking. Coal bunkers. Oddly enough, you'd be amazed at how many coal bunkers are still in the actual school district. And why is that important? Because, well, the coal bunkers were failing, and then the asphalt that was on top was crumbling, and so we had walls falling in and parking lots that could potentially cave in. It was a major problem. So the initial phase one was an estimate of $80.1 million. And as I said, when everything started, the district spent about $23 million on these smaller projects to try to accomplish that warm, safe, and dry. Well, unfortunately, the pandemic hit. Fortunately, the pandemic hit. What happened was we had an influx of federal funds, and we were able to change our overall approach to our facilities. Many of our facilities, if not most of our facilities, were working and being operated on antiquated equipment. When we get to Erie High, we'll show you some pictures, but Erie High at one point was a completely air-conditioned building. And sometime in the 90s, the chiller that ran the air conditioning broke. And what did we do? We just shut it off. We didn't repair it. We didn't replace it. We legitimately just shut it off. And that was what the district had to do over those years because there were no funds to make those improvements. They didn't exist. So our focus changes. We've got federal funds that we can use to upgrade our buildings, and so that became the approach that we are taking. Let's make sure that warm, safe, and dry includes correct ventilation and good windows that don't have snow coming in, and ensuring that our roofs are the correct way. So Erie High is probably the biggest project that I think the school district has ever undertaken. It's broken up into two phases, and we're hopeful that phase two can finish up sometime by the beginning of the 24-25 school year. Altogether, it is a $72 million investment in this building. This is a building that was built in 1957 on an old circus ground, which is just an odd fact I'll throw in there. And the building has not been renovated majorly since it was erected in 1957. So just think about that. I mean, building is built in 57. Here we are in 2024, and we're undertaking the first major renovation to the infrastructure of this building. It's a complete transformation. For those of you who remember the old steps that were out front of Erie High, there were two ramps on the side. The railing wasn't attached anymore. It had rusted out. The stairs were completely broken with concrete. And now we've got a brand new entrance that is perfectly level. It's a slope up, completely ADA accessible, as opposed to what we had before. No more crumbling steps. No more marble on the front that was falling off to the point where we, at one point, had a little bit of scaffolding around one of the columns because we were afraid that the marble that was put on in 57 would fall off and strike a student as they were entering the building. When we look inside the building, you can see the pictures. Just the difference in the hallways alone is eye-opening. And when we talk about access, this picture, I think, really points to it. Our students deserve to go to a building that doesn't look like the picture in the middle, that looks like the picture that's on the right. That's what our students deserve. We had classrooms that had floors that were original to the building, windows that were original to the building, old furniture, and now when we look at the transformation, it's night and day. Our gymnasium, which is still a work in progress, I'll admit to that, complete transformation here. And this summer we'll be finishing that by getting a new floor. We learned during the construction that this wood floor, which is there's only one other school district in the actual Commonwealth that has a floor system that's similar to this, it's a little bit wavy. And so this summer we hope to fix that as well. And it's something that our students who are taking gym class deserve. It's also something that our athletes that use the space deserve. I'm not really sure what else to say about this picture. It kind of just speaks for itself. I mean, we had wood where the window should be because the window had broken. And we just didn't have the funds to fix that. And now we've got all new energy efficient windows throughout the entire building. Our next biggest project was at Collegiate Academy. This also was broken up into 2 phases. Phase 1 of Collegiate was pre-planned, and that was pre-pandemic. And then phase 2 came about when the pandemic hit. Phase 1 was directed at fixing that promenade and just making it structurally sound. For any of you who had been in Collegiate Academy prior to us doing the work, if you went into what was our pool room, you would have seen that the concrete promenade, which is a staple to this building, was being held up by 2x10s. So our carpenters came in and made pillars made out of 2x10s, and that's how we were holding up a concrete structure. Yeah, wood 2x10s holding up a concrete structure, which any carpenter or engineer would not really like that. And I'm sure our insurance agent didn't like it either. So this project, again, over 2 phases, is $28 million. Complete overhaul of this building at this point. Collegiate happened to be one of those buildings that was not fully mechanically ventilated. When the building was built, ventilation meant you had operable windows. Building code changes, and so over the years, we just didn't have a way to bring in that mechanical ventilation. Most of the rooms were heated by steam radiators. And so now this building has a fully ducted air handling system that has adequate, and I will say very adequate, mechanical ventilation in every room throughout the building. The transformation in the gym is also amazing. When the district reopened Academy as Collegiate Academy in the late 90s, the South Gym, I think it's the South, one of the gyms wasn't even opened up because it was in such disrepair that they just said, we're just going to close it, we're not going to use it. They had one gym. Well, the other picture on the left was the usable gym, which if you look closely, you'll see there's cones there. And why are there cones there? Because that was blocking the students from running into the garbage bins that were collecting the water that was coming in through the promenade. Again, we talk about access to facilities. This is what our students had to endure. And now through this investment, you can see the transformation in the gyms. The pool room was an absolute disaster. And so now it's been completely filled in and renovated, and it is a dance studio for one of the programs that we have there. The transformation, again, in the hallways it's what our students deserve. This summer, we also finished up renovations at Wilson. Again, Wilson was one of these buildings that did not have mechanical ventilation. So depending on what room you're in, there was an air handler, a unit ventilator that was bringing in the mechanical ventilation. If not, we just opened the windows, and that's how they were getting their fresh air. This was a $15 million project that has completely transformed this building. Unfortunately, again, fortunately, we had a little bit of help from an unintended fire, which kind of forced our hand. But that was the stepping stone. That gave us the push to go ahead and say, we're going to do this building the right way. We had leaks in the gym. I mean, we talk about deferred maintenance and not doing preventative maintenance, and we didn't have the funds to fix these problems. I mean, this is a perfect example. We had a leak in the auditorium for years that we knew about, but we just didn't have the means or the funds to fix it. The difference in the gymnasium, again, it's what our students deserve. The last thing that I'll leave you with before I kind of summarize is the newest project that we have going, which is the Edison Elementary building. This is a brand new build. So the board approved the ability for us to build a new building. Unfortunately, the bids didn't work out the right way the first time, and so we're back out there for bid again, and hopefully we get the numbers that we need. This is an estimated cost of $34 million to construct a new Edison right behind the old Edison. The why to build a new one is because the old one is beyond disrepair. I'm not really even sure what other words to use. Their ventilation system, again, is unit ventilators. Not all of them work. It's an old steam building, and that's how it provides heat. You can notice just from the pictures the current conditions of the building. It also is a building that has no auditorium, and it's got a gym that is also the cafeteria. And when we talk about access, and we talk about what some of our peers out in the county have, they don't have to share a gym with a cafeteria and with an auditorium. They have a separate facility for each of those. This is the proposed layout. If you can kind of see it at the far right side, there is the outline of the old building. The new building will be set right behind it, and it will give our families access to a building that they deserve. So in the end, once we're done with Edison, phase one of our facilities plan, which I'll remind you originally was $80.1 million, is an estimated total of $191 million worth of investment back into our buildings, which is what our students deserve. And as Brian had mentioned earlier, we have phase two of our facilities plan that the architects designed, and that is a 10-year plan, and the estimated total for that is $188 million. So financial crisis, couldn't invest at all. Now we're in a position to invest $380 million in upgrading our facilities to what our students deserve over a 20-year time period. And with that, I'll bring Superintendent Polito back up.
So you can see we've done a lot of work over the last several years, but we still have a lot of work to do. My two assistant superintendents touched on, when you look at the financial crisis that hit us in 2011, which was 25 years in the making, that previous 25 years and what we had to do between 2011 and 2017 devastated the district. We had to strip everything down, and it impacted every single department. And so the last several years, we've been really working hard through these plans to rebuild it, and I hope you can see today, we're at a place where we have this solid foundation of programming and systems that we have in place, and we're confident that if we just stay the course, we're going to continue to see improvement in our student achievement and moving forward. But it has been a long process. We often say it's a marathon, not a sprint, and we need to stay the course despite pandemic and 3 fires and whatever is thrown at us on a daily basis, but we're making progress. So just touch on some of our challenges. Again, you saw our student achievement scores are still very low, something we need to continue to work on. As Teresa shared, the growth is very, very promising for us. Again, we started the implementation of the curriculum at the elementary level, moved to the middle school, and just finished up with the high school. So we're going to start to see, as our kids, again, move through this with the curriculum every year with a stronger foundation, we're going to see improvements in the achievement. Graduation rate, again, is low. That a lot of that's tied to chronic absenteeism. Again, another reason why we need to have the community school model at Erie High. Our families have become accustomed to having those supports at the elementary and middle level. They need to continue to have that at the high school level, and we're confident that if we get that in Erie High, it's going to really start to move things. Another one, and this is a nationwide problem, it's more difficult for us, is teacher recruitment. Our salary structure right now is kind of competitive, not 100% competitive. We were fortunate to get some additional funding last year from the state. We're able to adjust it up, but we still struggle to retain teachers when they can go over to a neighboring school and make $10,000 a year just like that. So that's something that we need to continue to work on, and we're hoping if we get additional funding from the state, that's something that we can really start to address. And then the state funding, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time about that, is still inequitable. We talked a little bit about how the state moved away from a per pupil funding formula. In 2015, they actually decided to try to tackle this. They established a Basic Education Funding Commission. It was a bipartisan commission that developed a formula that determined funding on a weighted student count, and the biggest weight on that formula was poverty. And the reason why they chose poverty is because it has such an impact on education. There's a direct correlation between student achievement and poverty. So obviously school districts like us that have additional poverty needs across the district need additional funding. The only problem with the way they implemented it was they kept the funding where it was. So they took that pot of money that everybody had received from 1995 to 2015 and said, you can keep what you've had, keep that inequitable funding, but moving forward, we're going to use the new formula. So they put in about 2 to 3% every year. That's what was driven out by the formula. So move ahead to 21-22. And this is kind of a snapshot of how we compare to the districts across the state. I mentioned this earlier, our median household income at $39,000 is in the bottom 3%. It's ranked 484th out of 500 school districts. Our English language learners, our charter enrollment are both in the top 3 to 6%. And you look at our state and local revenue on a per pupil basis, we're still in the bottom 22%. We're 391 out of 500 school districts. There's been progress since 14-15 when they implemented the formula. We were in the bottom 3% at that time, but we're still, again, inequitably funded. And if you look at the total revenue per pupil, again, we're still in the bottom 46%. And that funding is really supposed to level the playing field and give us additional funding to support our children with need, but it does not. So this one, I just wanted to show if we just continued the way we were with this funding and they put in 2 to 3% a year and did not tackle that hold harmless, that pot of money that was not driven out by a formula, you can see in 24 right now, only 25% of the entire pot of state funding, $7.8 billion, is being driven out with that formula. If you move ahead 50 years on this, you can see that we're starting to move in the right direction. 80% of it is through the formula. But really, it's going to take 100 years for this to be funded properly. And our kids can't wait that long. We can't continue to have that type of funding issue in the state. So fortunately, well, before I jump ahead to what we're doing today, I just wanted to show how this is impacting school districts across the state, and it really creates winners and losers. And some of the biggest losers in the state are our mid-sized cities because they have some poverty challenges, and their enrollment in their schools has stayed relatively stable compared to surrounding school districts. So you can see we're in the top 10 if you look at this list as far as the top 10 losers. If they took that entire pot of money and redistributed it with the formula, Erie School District tomorrow would get $22 million. And that's on a budget of $250 million. And this is a comparison in Erie County. And I want you to take a look at the last column. You can see the change in enrollments since 1995. And you can see most of the surrounding school districts saw a pretty significant decrease in their enrollment, and ours remained fairly stable. So over that time, everybody, again, continued to receive the same amount of funding, regardless of whether their student count went up or down. And during that time period, for the county schools, as their enrollment went down, they had more money to spend on a per pupil basis. So that's why you see some of those school districts having better facilities, their test scores are better. They are continuing to get more money on a per pupil basis, where we were staying the same, staying where we were in 1995. And if you look at this on a tax basis, so if you redistributed all the money tomorrow, and that's not going to happen because it would negatively affect those school districts, and then you took that money and you drove that savings or cost out to the taxpayers, what would that do to tax rates in the county? So this is where our tax rates are right now. I want to point out that Erie is right in the middle. We're not on the high end as far as our real estate taxes, so we try to stay right in the middle and be competitive with surrounding school districts. But if we receive that $22 million tomorrow and those other school districts had to raise taxes to compensate for seeing a reduction in state funding, this is what taxes would look like. Our tax rate would go down to $600 on a $100,000 home. And you look at the ones on the far left, Union City and Northwestern, they saw some of the biggest decreases in enrollment. Their tax rates would go to over $3,000 on the same size home. So it really is impacting us in this community. It's impacting economic development in the area, because you see how hard it is for us to compete with surrounding school districts when we don't have the funding we need to educate our students properly. So there has been some recent developments, some very positive ones. In February of 2023, the PA Supreme Court did rule that our funding system is inequitable, and they charged the legislature to do something about it. And fortunately, in May of 2023, the legislature did put together the Basic Education Funding Commission. It was a bipartisan commission, again, to study this, and they did come up with a report. Now, this report was adopted on party lines, but both sides did agree on a number of things. The biggest issue that they didn't agree on was how much funding to go in the system. The minority report, they felt that that should be left up to the legislature to decide how much funding went into the system. The majority wanted to calculate what that number should be and make a recommendation for funding. And what they did, and I really like the way they approached this, they took a look at the 75 most successful schools in the state, and they determined how much funding they were receiving on a weighted per pupil basis. And that funding amount came up to $3,700 per student. And then they looked at where every other school district was across the state, and they said, okay, if that's going to be the success number, then how do we get these school districts up to this $13,700, every school district across the state? And the price tag for that was $5.1 billion. And they made a recommendation that that be implemented over the next 7 years. And then in February of 2024, just last week, we were fortunate to see that Governor Shapiro did include that recommendation in his budget. So again, there's a lot of good progress happening here with this, and we're looking like we're going to see movement, but there's a big but with this. And I'll get to that right after this slide. This shows over the next 7 years what happens in Erie County if they implement this formula. And you can see $161.6 million would be invested into Erie County schools if they implemented this over a 7-year period. Erie School District would get $107 million, and that's on a $250 million budget. And when I saw that number, my first reaction was, how am I going to spend $107 million? Because we've been living so long with so little, I didn't really have a chance to think about what it would look like, and I was stuck on the $20 million number with the old formula. But as I thought about it, there's a lot of things that we really could do with that money. You know, again, we talk about the challenges we have in the city, and it's very challenging to teach our kids, and it's challenging to work in the city, and we could really make a difference on our salary schedule and make it more competitive, not only with surrounding school districts, but schools in the region, other urban schools in the region, so that we can attract more teachers to come to work at Erie School District. You saw some of the nice things we're doing with our facilities. Again, it's moved from warm, safe, and dry to warm, safe, and dry, and maybe a few nice things if we can afford it. We could actually build state-of-the-art or renovate to state-of-the-art facilities, very much like what's happening in the county schools. Those are a couple things. The other thing that we could seriously look at if we receive this level of funding is a tax decrease. Our total revenue right now from real estate taxes is $48 million. So we could put a sizable chunk of that towards real estate tax relief for our community. And again, doing that would help attract additional people into the community and make us more competitive as a city. So the big but, when you look at the state budget, they're dealing with some issues of their own. Right now, the Independent Fiscal Office is budgeting or is projecting that in 28-29, they're going to have a $4 billion deficit in their budget before they even implement this recommendation. So if you put the total cost of what the BEF Commission recommended, that'll take the total deficit up to $10 million if they implement that. And that's a big number for the state. Their general fund budget is about $46 million. So I just did some quick calculations, and if they did this with a tax increase, the personal income tax would have to go from 3.07 to 4.83. That's a huge increase. If they did it all through sales tax, it takes the sales tax to just above 10%. So it's a heavy lift, and I don't want to speak for our legislators that are in the audience, but I'm thinking that's probably dead on arrival when we're talking about that big of a tax increase. But what I've been hearing and reading is that they all understand that they need to address this year and start to tackle it. I don't think they've agreed on a number, but I've heard that a real estate or a tax increase is on the table, something that will need to happen in order to make this work. It sounds like it's going to come with some strings like school choice and real estate tax reductions, both of which I'm not concerned about as long as we're adequately funded, because I feel that if they're funding us where we need to be, we can be competitive. So it's all good news. I think, the takeaway for today is we need to continue to watch what happens in Harrisburg. And as we talk to leaders in Harrisburg, we want to make sure that this stays a top issue in this budget and they really work towards addressing it. All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to James Grumpy.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you. For those of you who've been following along in your packet, you'll see I only have one slide. But those who know me also know that doesn't limit how long I will talk. A couple closing thoughts, but one of the issues that we've talked a lot about at the Chamber lately is since 2018, just the level of investment that's gone into our community. And the number that we've been bantering about is about $1.2 billion has been invested in our community since 2018. And I just bring this up to point out the $200 million that was shown for the school district is not included in that number. So thank you to our school board for that. So I would say great information today, but now what? And I just want to say we at the Chamber view the performance of the school district as an economic development issue. The education of the 10,000 plus students, which is 1/3 of all the students in Erie County, in Erie Public Schools, is not just a school district or a city of Erie issue, it's an issue for all of us. These students are our future workers and community leaders, and our economic future depends on high-performing schools. This is a business issue. And the scores shared today demonstrate the obstacles ahead. I did a little research on this, and I found a paper done by the Brookings Institute in 2022. And they had the following conclusions. The pandemic erased more than 2 decades of progress in reading and math in 9-year-olds, and the effects were most profound for students in low-income communities. Additionally, money is not enough. Given the relationship between neighborhood well-being and school performance, championing and coordinating the resources to support a thriving educational environment is one of the best ways for local leaders to confront these challenges. Strong demand for communities with high-performing schools raises home values and generates wealth and investment. But the reverse is also true in areas where school quality is low. I actually just read an article yesterday urging people looking for rental investment to look for low-performing school districts for their investment. That's not what we need for our community. And finally, low levels of academic achievement compromise students' long-term educational and workforce outcomes, which diminishes the income and wealth building opportunities for them far into their adulthood. And this is why the community school approach is so vital to overcoming the obstacles that exist. And we must recognize that the high-performing outcomes in Erie Public Schools is vital to our future. The investment in Wayne School, now known as ECAT, and the groundbreaking last week of the new Erie Bank on Parade Street both demonstrate the value of investing in communities that have long been neglected. But it's more than that. We need your employees to live in the city, buy homes, enroll in the local schools. The call to action is that the health and performance of Erie Public Schools is vital to our community, and its performance is the same as our performance for the future. The very fact that you are here this morning demonstrates that you care. So support the campaign that Tim addressed. Be a champion of the Erie Public Schools. Thank Youth United Way for their leadership. Thank you for Erie Insurance for their leadership. Thank you to our school board members. And thank you all for being here today.
So we have about 5 minutes and would like to open it up to any questions that anyone might have for anyone who spoke today. Are there any questions or comments even? Too much information? Okay. Jim.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Brian if he'd be kind enough to talk a little bit about the charter school funding and the proposal that the governor just placed in his budget, and have any comments on that.
Well, charter enrollment is a big challenge for us. It's one of the things that was in our financial plan, is to reduce the number of students leaving from charter schools every year. It's about $34 million of our budget right now. It's a big challenge. And since the pandemic, we've seen a pretty big increase in the number of students that were leaving for cyber charter as well. We have our own cyber program. Most of our students do elect to stay with us, but some are leaving, and we have a capacity issue within the district. Our cyber program right now costs probably about $4,000 to $5,000 a student to run. The formula that they're using for cyber charter right now drives out a number of about $10,000 per student for a regular ed student and $29,000 for a special ed student. That's $29,000 regardless of what type of special education they need. They may only need to go to see a hearing specialist once a week, and that charter school gets a $29,000 benefit out of it. So it's a big challenge for us. What the governor has proposed is to put a flat rate of $8,000 per cyber charter student. The only thing that I don't like about the way he's proposed it is for the special ed, they're still having that bump of the difference between our cyber or regular ed and our special ed. So it would be for a special ed student $8,000 plus about $20,000 per student. So overall, our calculation shows that that'll save us about $1.8 million, and we'll take it, but it's still not really addressing the issue completely.
Any other questions or comments? You'll be receiving some follow-up information. We do welcome the business community, civic leaders to take tours of the community schools in the city. We have elementary and middle schools, which are the established community schools. Some of them are the mature community schools. So you can see that all of the resources that are brought in and the partnership between United Way and Erie's public schools that is supported through the business community and our donors. We also welcome tours, people to go on a tour of Erie High. There are a lot of really good things going on at Erie High. I think there's a misconception that it's just a terrible school. There are some real positive things. And once we launch the community school model in the fall, we really anticipate an acceleration of the positive outcomes for the students. One thing that, for those of you who are familiar with the community school model, we have one community school director in each elementary school and each middle school. For Erie High, we are anticipating a minimum of 4 community school directors. So the model is going to look a little bit different, and quite frankly, we think it will be a model that we will be able to share nationwide. So again, thank you for your support. Thank you for your attendance this morning. And if you have any follow-up questions, I think you know how to find us. So have a great rest of your day.